Hello, welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman, and today I have block number 34 of my 52-week series of Scrappy Blocks to share with you. It's a wonderful little block. It's called the Scrappy Irish Chain. Here's a glimpse of it. A real fun one to create. Can't wait to show it to you. A couple of things I wanted to share with you before I show you the new Scrappy block here is number one, behind me on the wall is a Scrappy quilt pattern that you will find out on my website. This is a mystery quilt. I just completed my spring 2023 mystery quilt, and this one's called Stars in My Eyes. And you can find the information, the class, the videos, the PDFs, all of the information is out on my website. So just go to quiltingwithlori.com. I'll have a link below. Find my mystery quilt tab and go there and you can see everything about that class. We just finished it a couple weeks ago. But block number 31 and block number 32 of my Scrappy 52-week series is included in this particular pattern. So check it out. I hope you'll make this quilt. It's a lot of fun. All the videos are out there as well. And also, if you have not yet watched my tutorial on how to scrap up your stash and get it cut, sorted, organized, and ready to go so you can use your scraps to make beautiful quilts, don't forget to check out my book, which I'll link below in the description box below, how you can find this book out on my website. And I'll also link the tutorial of the video so that you can actually watch it from beginning to end and know exactly what you need to do to get your scrap stash cut, sorted, organized, and ready to use. And there is a corresponding patterns book as well. There are 12 additional scrappy patterns in here. So between the two books, you get a total of 17 wonderful scrappy patterns and everything you need to know to learn how to get your scrap stash ready to make beautiful quilts. So don't forget, in the description box below, you're going to find a PDF. And my PDFs, typically they'll give the instructions for the block itself, but they typically also include a sample of a quilt idea for you where you can use the block that I'm presenting and put it together in a quilt. And they're just an idea, but I hope it will inspire you to get to work on making some beautiful scrappy quilts. So let's take a look at what we need to make this scrappy block. On my tabletop, you'll see a sample of this beautiful Scrappy Irish chain. And you'll notice in my little squares, the chains that are encircling the center, it's a square and a square, and then there are the chains. I have used some lighter mediums on these two sides, and I've used some darker mediums there. And then, of course, they're all encircled with some lights throughout those 4 patches, and there are a total of 8 4-patch units in this block. There's 1 square and a square unit in the center, and there are 4 half-square triangle units in this block. So what you're going to need, and the PDF will give you all of the information on what you need to pull. But I do have, with my dark, I have pulled a 5-inch square. I needed that. I also needed 2 dark 4-inch squares, so I have those right there. I needed 4 light 4-inch squares, so I have those, and they're going to be used to create the square and the square unit, as well as the half-square triangles. And then I need at least 16 of the light 2-inch squares and 16 of the medium to medium dark 2-inch squares, and they're going to be used to create the 4-patch units in our block. So that's what you'll need to pull from your scrap stash for each block. So if you plan to make this quilt, which uses 16 of these blocks, everything that you've pulled, you'll need to take that time, multiply it by 16, so that you'll have enough for the entire quilt. But it's a fun little quilt block to create, very easy to do, so let me show you. I'll take you to the sewing machine and show you how we're going to put it together. So the first thing that we're going to do is create our 4-patch units, and I have 8 of them all laid out here with my light 2-inch squares and my medium dark 2-inch squares. And you'll notice that in some cases I'm trying to keep them lighter on one side and darker on the other side. But that is totally up to you. You can certainly lay out your blocks any way that you like. So I'm going to go ahead and create each of the 4-patch units, and then I will square them up to 3.5 inches. I've just finished one of the 4-patch units, and now I'm going to work on this next one. I like to web my little 4-patch units together. I'm simply going to take the light one, put it on top of the darker square, and I'm going to sew it. Then I'm going to take the next set and put the dark on top of the light, bring it up here, and sew it as well. Now you'll see I have 2 units that are webbed together with that thread. I've opened them. I'm going to put them together, nest the seam allowances with the dark seam allowance going to the dark. And now I'm going to sew that together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And there is the second one. Looks like I've run out of thread. I'm going to have to add some more bobbin thread there, but when I finish that, then this will be finished. I had to wind another bobbin, but I've finished that now, so that second 4-patch is ready. And I'm simply going to work my way around and complete each of these 4-patch units in using the same technique. So I'll get those done and I will be right back. Here you see that I have put some of these units together. So I have these 2 bottom units sewn together, these 2 side units sewn together, and the top units sewn together. And before I did that, I made sure that each and every 4-patch was squared up to 3.5 inches. That's very important. And now I'm going to take this last unit here and sew it together. So let me run it over here and stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, and then I will press that as well. So we have all of our 4-patch units finished, and they're sewn together in units just like that. Now we're going to work on our half square triangles, and then we're going to work on our square and a square, the center part of this scrappy block. To make my half square triangles, again, we're going to use a technique that I have taught over and over with my Speedy Solutions Scrappy squares. I'm simply going to take a light 4-inch square, that's the size that we're needing for this block, and a dark 4-inch square. I'm putting them right sides together. I drew a diagonal line from corner to corner, and then I am going to stitch a scant 1/4 inch on each side of that diagonal line. So I have 2 dark 4-inch squares, 2 light 4-inch squares. Once I complete these half square triangles, I'll have a total of 4 half square triangle units. So let's see how this is done. So I'm bringing it to the machine, and I am going to stitch a scant 1/4 inch on both sides of that diagonal line. So here you'll see that they are sewn together, and I do these in assembly line fashion, so depending on how many half square triangle units you need for whatever you're working on, just put them all together at one time. Sew down one side of the units and then come back the other side. Now I'm going to cut them apart, and as you've seen me do before, when I cut them apart, I like to get rid of the dog ears, so I cut from stitching line to stitching line, as you'll see there. This scissors doesn't seem to be very, very sharp, but if you look at that, I have cut it from stitching line to stitching line, so it got rid of some of the dog ears. I'm going to do the same thing on the very end, stitching line to stitching line, little cut. That gets rid of the dog ears on both sides. Now I'm going to cut on the drawn line. You can certainly do this on your rotary mat with your rotary cutter. I'm just simply going to do it with a scissors here. So I have now created a total of 4 half square triangle units that I will use for each of the 4 corners of this block. Each one of these units needs to be squared up to 3.5 inches. That's really important. So I'm going to square them up, and I like to use a particular square up triangle unit. I'll show that to you here in the tabletop in just a moment. And once I square them up, then I will take them over to the iron and press them, and I'll press it to the dark. The square up ruler that I like, it's a triangle shape square up ruler, and so you use it with your half square triangle units still in that triangle shape. You'll line up the stitching line on the ruler to the stitching line on your unit. This is called the Clearly Perfect Slotted Trimmer, and I'm using trimmer A, and I'm going to use the 3.5 inch stitching line there and line it up on the 3.5 inch stitching line on my unit, and then just trim around the outer edges that need to get trimmed away. So let me show you how that's done. There's many different square up rulers out on the market. Just use whatever one works best for you. You can even just use a square ruler itself to actually do this. I had to reach over and grab my OmniGrid ruler here. It is a 6-inch square ruler by OmniGrid, and it has a 45-degree line in it, and that's what is really important. Whenever you want to square up half square triangle units, you can certainly use these as long as you can square up your half square triangle unit to the size that's required. And so this one's a 6-inch. It would work perfectly for a 3.5 inch unit. You would have to press your half square triangle unit open, and then what you would do is line up the 45-degree line on the sewing line of the unit, and then make sure that it measures at the 3.5 inch marks all the way around, and remove any excess. And of course I've already trimmed this one up, so it is perfectly lined up and everything is trimmed away. So it's a perfect 3.5 inch unit. And when you have all of these squared up to 3.5 inches, then make sure they're pressed, and then they are ready to go for the 4 corners of our block. So we have the perimeter of our block all ready to go. We've got our 4-patch units ready. We have our half square triangle units in each of the corners. They're ready to go. Now we're going to work on our square and a square, and you can certainly put this together in the reverse order. You can start with your square and a square, work on your 4-patch units, and then your half square triangle units. It doesn't really matter. That's just how I happen to do it today. But for my square and a square, I'll be using the 5-inch dark square and the 4-inch light squares, and there are 2 lights. What I'm going to do with these 4-inch squares is cut them on the diagonal once so that I'll have 4 triangles, and each of those triangles is going to be placed around this unit here. I'm going to press this center block so that I create some creases on all 4 centers of the square. And those creases will help me to line up my triangles. I'll press the center of the triangles as soon as I get them cut. So let me get them cut and pressed, and I'll show you how I'll sew them. I have taken my 2 4-inch squares. I've cut them once on the diagonal, and I've created a total now of 4 triangles that will go around that 5-inch dark square. I have also creased each of these triangles in the center, so that crease line will match up to the crease line that I placed in the center of each side of the square. So I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to do opposite sides. I'll sew these sides together, and then I'll sew these sides together. So I've got them matched. The creases are matching. Bring it over, sew a 1/4 inch. And for right now, I'm just going to finger press it. So that one is on. Then I'm going to take this one, find that crease, match the crease to the square. There we go. Bring it over here and sew 1/4 of an inch. All right, so we have opposite sides done. Now I'm going to do the same with these 2 triangles, match up those creases in the center, sew 1/4 of an inch. This is basically snowballing a square is what you're doing. It's just one technique for snowballing a square. And then it will end up being what they call a square in a square unit. So here's the last triangle. So what we're going to do now is press this open, and I'm going to press everything away from the center. It will lay nicer, but then what's really important is that this unit gets squared up to 6.5 inches. So I'm going to go press it, square it up, and I'll be right back. So here is my block at this point. I've got my center unit pressed and squared up to 6.5 inches. Now I'm going to sew row 1 together. So these 2 half square triangle units will be sewn to these 4 patch units. Make sure that you orient them properly. And then I'm going to sew these 2 units on each side of that square in a square unit. And that's basically row 2 and 3 combined. And then row 4 is simply the same as row 1. It's just reversed and upside down. And make sure that your half square triangle units stay in this orientation, or else your block will look different. You could certainly, if you wanted to, turn this around and create a different look. Totally up to you. This is your block. Have fun with it. But by putting, and then you'd have light colored squares right here. That secondary block would be light colored squares right there. By placing it this way, as my Scrappy block pattern shows, we're going to have secondary blocks that are going to be dark colored squares in each of these corners. So have fun with it. Experiment. See what you might like to do for your block. I'm going to go ahead and sew these units together. When you sew your block, be sure that you have your units oriented properly. I almost sewed this one the opposite direction with these 2 darker squares up close to the square and square unit. So make sure, double check everything before you actually sew it, or you might be doing some ripping. But this would be a great block to make in rainbows of colors, maybe every single square with all of your little tiny 4 patch units. They could be done in a different color of the rainbow. So you could have fun with this block. So I've done row 1, 2, and 3 combined, and 4. And now I'm just going to put these rows together. I'm going to press it, and I've pressed all of these in opposite directions so that they go together nicely, and you can identify how to do that. I guess I've got this one backwards here. How that should be done as you're working through it. But my center I've pressed out, and then these half square triangles I've pressed in so that they'll match and nest nicely. So that's how I have pressed mine. I'm going to go ahead now and sew them together. And then I'm going to press the block and square it up to 12.5 inches. I'll meet you back at the tabletop in just a minute. Here we have a couple of the Scrappy blocks, the Irish chains put together. I love the block, and I can't wait to make a quilt using this. It's just really beautiful how there's a secondary design that's going to be popping out when you put a bunch of these blocks together. I would love to see some of your blocks and quilts that you're making using this Scrappy blocks. Please don't forget to post those out on my Facebook page. It's Quilting with Lori in Facebook, and then find my group, which is Scrap Up Your Stash. And I'll have links below in the description box so that you can easily find that to post pictures. Love to see what you're putting together out there. They're just a lot of fun. I hope you're enjoying my Scrappy Blocks. This 52-week series is almost, it's over, half over. I cannot believe how quickly this has gone. I'm looking forward to putting together a quilt using the first 26 blocks of this Scrappy series. And so hopefully I'll have that going here in the next couple of weeks so that I can share some of that with you. And by the end of the 52-week series, I plan to have a booklet of all of the patterns put together for you. So that's something that you can look for out on my website. Hope you've enjoyed this. I have certainly enjoyed sharing all of this with you. Love to hear your comments. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And we will see you soon to scrap up another Scrappy block from your stash. So until next time, happy quilting, and we'll see you soon.